Nice. Welcome everyone to another community call, ResearchHub. And today we have a few items on the agenda, starting with feature roadmap review. It's my understanding that so users are interested what bugs are a priority, what features are a priority, and is there any convenient way to take a look at the priority list, so to say. What would be the best way to interact with the team here, Patrick?
So I think what we should do for new features is use a GitHub discussion. Kobe had set it up. Kobe, do you mind kind of like walking through? I think we should use this later in this call too for the peer review discussion. But in general, just to help, I guess, like centralize some of these talks, because they're kind of in the Slack channel now, and then also in the ResearchHub. Just to put them all in one place, I think the GitHub discussion forum is probably the best venue.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. We recently open sourced our repos, and we're trying to leverage the discussions feature on GitHub because, just to give you guys all context, the reason why we want to do it is because us developers are sometimes removed from the conversations that lead to features being developed. And it's really nice to be able to reference like a conversation so that the developers can actually have context and build the feature the right way. So maybe I do a little bit, Anton, if you don't mind, I'll do a little bit of screen share.
Sure.
Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so we have, these are all the repos that we have. We have a bunch of them. ResearchHub Web is where we're trying to streamline all conversations. Unfortunately, there is no like easy way to do it. Ideally, GitHub would have like a discussion feature on the organization itself, but it doesn't have that. So ResearchHub Web is the best place to do it. And so like if you go here and you click on discussions, we just kicked it off last week. You can see there is like a bunch of discussions here. On the left, there is like categories. So you have like bugs, ideas and requests, open source bounties, which are like bounties that we will pay in RSC for some open source development contributions, and Q&A, which is like, could be anything. So we're playing around with it. You can see here for the brainstorm for peer review, there is like a lot of stuff I added here, and we can go over it at the end. But I just want to emphasize that not every feature request needs to be this detailed. It can even be like one sentence. The reason why I put it all here is because like I've thought about it and I wanted to put all my thoughts in one place. So yeah, let me pause here. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So I imagine that makes sense. And just to give you a context, so like let's say in GitHub, there is this notion of pull request, which is like where we have code and it just makes it so nice. Like GitHub makes it really nice to reference like a particular discussion. It all comes together. And one of the things we want to do next, there is GitHub is a project feature that's not, I didn't enable it yet, but
I think we lost Kobe.
No.
Yeah.
I guess curious, do you all think we should just pin that repo in the editor channel or the community channel and just people to it temporarily?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can do that right after this call. And do you think it makes sense to do it on GitHub rather than through the ResearchHub forum or via Slack? This is mostly for the engineers to help organize the feedback. It's kind of like a pain in our butts to make it easier for them in theory.
It's probably easier for engineers if we do it in GitHub, right?
Yeah, way easier. And to put like all the context and like the use cases of why features like want to be in theory developed. Cool. Yeah, so I can definitely do that right after this call. Anton, do you know what was next on the agenda? We can do that while we wait for Kobe.
I think the next one is also Kobe, the trending hot score feedback.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I
so
think I lost you guys. Were you able to hear anything I said?
we lost like the last like 2 minutes, maybe.
2 minutes. Bummer. Okay. Do you guys? Where did I drop off?
Kind of like walking through the discussion forum.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bummer, but it's okay. I guess it happens. Do you want to do the feature roadmap stuff?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on like with my internet. Maybe I turned off my camera. I've been having like intermittent like internet failures today. I've been kind of going crazy trying to debug this, but yeah, hopefully I won't drop off. Can you guys see my screen?
Good, yeah.
Yeah, so like the discussions feature, so you heard me, there was like one other thing I wanted to point out, which is we have this engineering task list, which is a Notion board. GitHub also has a feature like this, and we're going to probably migrate this feature into GitHub for more visibility. Yeah, so anyways, let's go over some roadmap stuff. So before I share the roadmap with you, I want to go over some like high-level goals. So yeah, just to give people more context. So you guys can see it, right? I'm going to like ask you for things just because like I might drop off. You guys can see things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I can't see anyone. So, right. So the high-level goals that we have for 2022, and they're subject to change because we're a startup at the very, I guess, like cutting edge industry, and things change like sometimes from week to week. So far, high-level goals are: one, identify product market fit through continuous exploration. So that means really figuring out where does ResearchHub fit within the scientific community. Where is our place? Two, identify a revenue generation model. So we still need to generate income in order to keep operations going. That's a very important topic for us. Identify a DAO structure that fits ResearchHub. So right now, we're exploring different models, and I think we're on like identified some good stuff here, but hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have something more concrete. Increase our weekly active contributors. So it's kind of a KPI / goal. At the moment, we have very few weekly active contributors, and we want to make that like about 10 times higher. Grow our developer community. So at the moment, we're a very small team, and we just need a lot more resources. So that's why we open source our repos and started this bounty program, because we want to attract more developers and more hands to help us build a good product. Yeah, and continue to build an economy around ResearchCoin. So right now, ResearchCoin is like at its infancy, but we want to experiment with different models and to actually create an economy where ResearchCoin makes a whole lot of sense. So let me pause here, and Joyce, if you have anything more to add, please feel free to.
No, I think that's great, Kobe. Thanks for putting this all together. It would be interesting to see like what people think of these goals, and generally when we zoom into how we're going to achieve them, if everybody thinks we're kind of like on the right track planning wise.
Yeah, makes sense. Does anyone have any thoughts about any one of these topics? Please feel free to share. I think it's very helpful to hear what other community members have to say.
Hi, Kobe. Regarding regarding trying to look for a revenue generation model, are we are we experimenting with a lot of stuff right now, or are we just waiting for something to strike us? I mean, what progress are we doing in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So We are like, we've not experimented with anything yet. We've only experimented in brainstorm. So what we have come up with so far is a couple of things. So thing number one has to do with our the new upcoming feature of electronic lab notebook. So it will be the basic electronic lab notebook will be available to everyone. That's at least our thinking right now, but maybe certain certain like specific features, like for example, like integration with ResearchHub and things like that may incur additional cost. So that's one model. The other model that we have been thinking about is fundraising. So we want to, one of the goals of ResearchHub is to kind of disrupt and fix a lot of the fundraising problems in science. And we are thinking about doing that through crowdfunding and NFT minting. And the thinking behind it is that we can, ResearchHub can charge a specific percentage through these fundraising campaigns. These are like not new models; they exist at the moment, and we're thinking about like stuff like that. Yeah.
I think to add to that too, one model we've tried but don't love potentially long term is having like a percent of tips through ResearchHub flow back into the DAO. So this is something where like, yeah, essentially every transaction you make via the supporting feature, a certain percentage could flow back into the DAO's revenue. It'd be pretty easy for us to enact something like this, but we don't love it because it doesn't seem like it's really going to make a like huge dent in our mission of accelerating science. Like it could be a nice way to start to generate like a little bit of revenue, but at the end of the day, taking like a tip on or a fee on tips doesn't feel that impactful compared to like trying to help collaboration through the ELN or trying to make funding basically like easier to get for the average scientist and also more efficient for funders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts about any of these topics before we move on to some like in the weeds?
Yeah. Also, thank you for that answer. And also about product market fit. Do we have any specifics that we are trying to, any specific KPIs, for example, that we are trying to meet that would signal that we are reaching product market fit?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of theorizing around product market fit. If you follow like startup Twitter, a lot of times people say like, it's like, you know, this is the worst analogy ever, but it's like pornography. Like, you know it when you see it and it's hard to describe otherwise, right? Like the Supreme Court ruling. What I've heard with product market fit is basically like, and this is like the description that I like the most, but it's like, your entire team wants to quit because they're overworked and there's too much happening. And then also on top of that, there are like community members showing up to your offices with tattoos of your company's logo. So it's like just overwhelming demand for the product where it's like, you know, we're out of our bandwidth for the current team size. And then also like a kind of euphoria among community members. So this is, you know, clearly a broad definition that doesn't really mean all that much, but it's like one of those situations that's hilarious. It's one of those situations where it's like it will be very obvious once we have it, but if it doesn't feel like we have it, then we probably don't. With that being said, though, the video that like somebody just randomly made, maybe they're on this community call. I don't even know if they are. Thank you so much. I think it was really cool. But that's kind of like a little, like maybe that's like 1/10 of a tattoo, like showing up at our office, like somebody's, you know, taking their own free time and making a YouTube video to help promote ResearchHub. And I thought it was pretty good. Like it was solid for just somebody in their free time making a video. So I think we're on the right track, but yeah, I haven't started pulling my hair out yet. So a little bit more to go, I think.
Yeah. Was there any questions? Were there any questions in the chat? I can't see the chat.
Maulik had a hand.
Oh yeah, feel free to ask, please.
Yeah, hi. Regarding you know, like the revenue generation, like just a few minutes ago, I think Kobe, you mentioned about the peer review part. So is that gonna be down the line something that would help ResearchHub, right? Like, I mean, right now, I mean, I know our goal is open access, but if at all this becomes like a publication platform, which is one of our goals, like, and people submit manuscripts, then do we charge, and does that help ResearchHub?
Yeah, so this is a great suggestion. There's been a lot of talk because of the tweet from Nature Neuroscience where they say, their article processing charge is $11,000. Like, a lot of people have been pretty upset about that. So I think there is a potential business model within a peer review feature for us where maybe like we have some kind of more reasonable APC where the actual value there funds to the peer reviewers rather than like to the company behind like the peer review organization. And then also any additional revenue could flow back into the DAO. I think this is compelling because as a researcher, you'd be paying an APC to yourself in theory as you earn research coins and like earning like governance rights over that revenue. And then having peer reviewers actually be paid for their expertise, I think is very compelling and would make a lot more sense from researchers who want to publish to know that like their money is actually going towards value instead of like volunteer work where a C Corp somewhere is generating like lots and lots of revenue from it. So I think there's something there. It's not my favorite because APCs generally just make my skin crawl. So like I think we could do better. But there is something there that I think could potentially be valuable and help us start to generate some revenue.
Okay, good. Thank you. And one more question. This is like from prior about the GitHub part. I was just trying to make sure. So like you guys are saying, so if there is some problem or something, instead of Slacks, we put it on GitHub. Is that what I understand correctly?
So bug reports are perfect for Slack. And this would be like new feature requests. So rather something breaking, Slack, because that needs our attention immediately. But this is for like if you want something new in ResearchHub that doesn't exist yet, that's where GitHub would be the appropriate venue.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
by the way, I know it's a bit confusing because I have bugs here, but this is mainly for kind of people outside of the community that are using open source, and in the future, like I'm thinking there may be a class of people that will not be slacking us about these bugs. So the more avenues for bug reporting, the better, but Slack is certainly the preferred channel.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for these questions. So now let's get a little bit in the weeds and talk about the roadmap. As you can see, it's a bit, I guess, what's the word? Empty when it comes to Q2 and beyond. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, we're like in a very cutting edge field and we're trying a lot of different things, and who knows what Q2 will really look like. Definitely Q3 and Q4. I could put stuff up there, but they would likely, within 90% confidence, change. So I figured we'll focus on Q1 and a little bit of Q2. So for Q1, we open sourced our repos. We launched the editor program. We improved our notifications. We iterated on our author profile page. So now there is like a feed instead of like kind of like a snapshot of things. And there is a bunch of things we've done, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. Some of the things we are currently working on / yet to work on are revamping our paper upload feature. We hear you. We know it sucks. It was created a while back, and like, trust us, it's definitely the #1 thing that we're trying to tackle. So it will be fixed, and we're just to give you a little bit more insight, it will be much simpler in the sense that when you kick off the paper upload flow, there will be just one field, which will be like either give us a link to a paper or a DOI, or upload a file kind of thing, but all in like one field. And then we'll kick things off and do things behind the scenes and upload the paper. So yeah, we have designs for it, and we're going to start working on it this week. So yeah, as I mentioned, fundraising will start things off this quarter and will likely not finish until Q2. We will begin things with NFTs. We have not yet done an official brainstorming. I will kick things off on GitHub, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts because this is like the beginning of revenue generation for ResearchHub and also the beginning of something really cool for the scientific community. Our initial thoughts are like basically at the time of publication on ResearchHub, you'll be able to mint an NFT. Not sure what that NFT may look like. It could be like an NFT representing your paper or an NFT representing a figure. That NFT can be purchased by someone via an auction. And in the future, things like intellectual property profits, profits from intellectual property, like if it's like pharmaceutical or something like that, can be shared with the owner of an NFT. Are we going to go into open edition NFTs, minting of tokens? Not sure yet. More of that to come. So that's that. Feed, we're going to improve our feed. I'm working on that at the moment, showing more relevant results. As you see, like feed it was good up until a certain point, but a lot of the things that we have were created a while back and they made sense, but now is the time to improve on them. The feed is one of those things. ELN plus publishing features. Thomas gave a nice demo on what that looks like. So that's going to go live like early/mid next week. And what that would do is essentially replace the post feature with a more like robust publication feature. And one of the things Joyce has been working on is being able to have ResearchHub be a DOI. I guess it's called a DOI creator, so that if you choose in certain cases publish content, that content is going to be assigned a DOI. So we want to really compete with like other publication avenues and make ResearchHub a publication platform. Yeah, we want to lock down publication params. So right now at ResearchHub, you can publish anything, and we experimented by keeping things open, and that made sense. But right now we don't want to become like a Reddit. We don't want to become like just another site on the web that already exists. We want to narrow down our focus on like what is ResearchHub's value. So we want to lock down publication params, implement these parameters into the notebook feature and into our kind of guidelines. Iterate on our incentive structure, token incentives. Like right now, the incentives that incentivizes upvoting has been created a while back, but it's due for an upgrade. So we're going to tackle that this quarter, and we're going to kick off the peer review process. This is something we're really excited about. We think it has a lot of potential, and we want to do it in such a way where the peer reviewer and the author would get rewarded for review, so that authors also feel compelled to publish because they will get rewarded with RC for their publication. So yeah, that's for Q1. I'm going to quickly cover Q2 and then I'm going to pause. So for Q2, it's looking a bit empty here, but we're going to improve on our ELN features by likely integrating with Jupyter Notebook so that you can run code directly in our ELN. We're going to improve our fundraising tools. So we really like Mirror. I'm not sure if you heard of Mirror, but they're like a publication website for, I guess, anything. Like if you're like an author, like a Substack type thing where you can publish content, and you can do things like mint NFT in auctions, or you can crowdfund via token creation, and you can do something called splitting, which is pretty cool, where you can say define exact rules for sending profits to different locations. So like imagine if you're auctioning an NFT, and you can set param saying like, if this NFT is purchased, I want 10% of the proceeds to go here, and 10% to go there, and 80% to me. And you can programmatically do this, and that goes on the blockchain. And that's pretty cool. We were going to build on the editor program. We thought it was very successful, and we're at the infancy of that program, and we want to like improve on it. So yeah, let me pause here. Any questions, any thoughts?
I think just to add a tiny bit more context to this too, some of these features like the fundraising feature and peer review, like they probably require a quarter of full attention. So one of the things that we could use your help from here is helping us to prioritize which ones to address first. In our minds, kind of the long-term flow is getting publishing on ResearchHub. So that way people can share new publications, basically preprints with DOIs. After that, peer review. So that way these preprints can be openly peer reviewed and eventually, gain like a peer reviewed publication status on ResearchHub. And then once that's happening, we think it makes sense to get into funding, because if you have authors who are sharing novel content and doing peer review, there's actually a large pool of like kind of interesting scientists that funders would want to, I guess, interact with and help like provide support for their work. So in our minds, the strategy makes sense of doing publications, peer review, and then funding, basically in order to have enough content and people around that are interesting for the funders by the time we get there. Does that make like a sense as order of operations for everybody? Do you think we might have things kind of out of order potentially?
I guess, Patrick, like with the Jupyter, I'm guessing it's at the top of the list because it's the number one priority for Q2, or is that kind of depending on? Okay.
It's something Thomas is very excited about, the engineer who's been working on the ELN. So he personally is passionate about it and wants to build it into the ELN. So that's why we have it like pretty near the top. I know that Anton has a question about this too. Anton, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I guess. Sorry. Is my audio okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, I'm also excited about the Jupyter Notebook and the ELN, because I think the one thing is the whole revenue pipeline and doing the incentives with crypto, but I also think that it's really important to have some value in publishing through the website. And so the question was kind of like, do we already know, are the notebooks, are they going to run locally on the devices of the people or in a cloud service? Do we what's like the purpose of like the notebook right now? Is it like for demo purpose so that we could like make a blog post where there's sometimes little code snippets which we can load, or is it like, is there like further ideas for like proper papers using them and like a new ways of publications, like Hugging Face integrations, like where you can click and run a model or some computation automatically?
Yeah, very good question. So the notebook will not run locally. It's a web-based notebook, and it will be very similar. I'm not sure if you use Notion, but in Notion, if you can see my screen, and you can create like a, yeah, let's look at like, I don't know, like any document that you create essentially gives you very basic publication features, like, bolding, headers, etc. So that's what our notebook is going to allow. It's just going to make it a little bit easier and digestible to publish content via the web. You could also work locally, let's say in Word or whatever tool of your choice. And then when you're ready, you can come to ResearchHub and copy and paste that content into the ELN. That's another alternative way. In regards to the Jupyter notebook, since it's web-based, you will run the code and stuff like that, similar to Google's Code Lab, directly in the web. Understand that it might not fit all cases, but the intention of it is to make the publications as good as it can be. So if it means running code for the sake of publication, you can do that, or you can even like run the code locally, take a screenshot of the output, put it into the ELN. That's another way of doing it. Yeah, we're still experimenting, but that's kind of like the high level thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds great. So like right now, it seems like as a researcher, the incentive would be that I can, when I write a paper or I want to write a blog post additional to the paper or just a blog post, I can use the ELN in like the midterm future for exactly that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Anton, if you have more feedback too, I can connect you with Thomas, who's the developer leading the ELN, and I'm sure a lot of these thoughts he'd have, more color to share, and then also be able to incorporate your feedback. So I'll connect you guys. He's on vacation for this week, but once he gets back, I'll put him in touch.
Yeah, sure, sounds great.
Satvik had a hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is coming from my lack of research experience, but isn't there some sort of Notion API or any other integration that we can do instead of building our own notebook?
Yeah, we can. So Notion is like a preliminary API, and it's something we looked into because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And it's something we considered. The reason why we ended up building our own Notion-like solution is because in order to create like a really good user experience, unfortunately, you do need to reinvent the wheel sometimes, and that's one of those times, because by having the notebook feature directly in ResearchHub, we can build features on top of it in a way that Notion would not allow for. And yeah, because like at the end of the day, like if you do use the Notion API, all the data is saved to Notion, and then kind of like embedding that data back into ResearchHub is not so easy. And this was kind of like the path of least resistance.
All right. My suggestion here was in the form that maybe we could do an MVP of those notebooks through a Notion integration, and then if the users and the community found it very useful, then we could build out the product instead of giving it a lot of resources right out the bat.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. I think any suggestion that involves like less resources needing to be expended on our part is really good. So thank you, I appreciate it. I think one of the things we have done that was somewhat successful is that we shared early designs with the community about like how things should look and feel. And we thought that we're able to collect some really valuable feedback before implementation. So that was quite useful. And yeah, so any ideas about how to save us some time would be always greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Another piece of this too, Satvik, is that we believe the CLN is going to be kind of like the core product of ResearchHub, like in 2 or 3 years, where Notion probably could start as an MVP, but we want to build like a ton of features on top of it specific for scientific publishing. And so in our minds, it's worthwhile to get something bespoke built in-house just because it's such an integral like piece of the product moving into the future that the assumption is that it's worthwhile to spend time building it out right, so that way we'll be able to customize it appropriately. I guess Ricardo?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things about peer review and fundraising. So as for peer review, I just wanted to ask if you considered any possible conflict with like people that would potentially like to also publish on scientific journals? So are we going to be treated like preprint, so people will be allowed to publish on ResearchHub and then go publish on a journal, or is that going to create any problem to the authors? And the second one, regarding the fundraising, I think someone already raised this point a couple calls ago. It could be cool to look into some potential grants. There's a lot of money being thrown at like new technologies, like in regards to like disruptive technologies, regarding like Web3 and stuff like this. So it could potentially like be a good idea. I don't know in like in the US, but I know for sure that in Europe there's a specific kind of like bunch of calls like dedicated, tailored for these kind of products.
Yeah, so these are great questions. The first one I think is really important. From our perspective, we believe that open science is kind of the future. And so we want any publication shared on ResearchHub to be interoperable with the current academic publishing system. So if people wanted to share a preprint on ResearchHub, but then eventually have that manuscript published in Nature, we don't want to have like any legal restrictions that would potentially prevent that, kind of in the same vein as bioRxiv or medRxiv or archive, taking like basically following their exact lead. We can offer a like range of licenses for people to publish under. I know bioRxiv even has some that are like essentially only allow bioRxiv to like display the preprint. I think ideally we'd want to kind of funnel people into like Creative Commons licenses that allowed for like unrestricted reuse and repurposing. But it's possible that we could eventually do something different if customer demand, asked us to. But in general, we want to follow the lead of other preprint servers that have made it very easy, for ResearchHub to essentially display their content, having it be open access as a default. The second part of this question, potential grants for fundraising, I think that this is an awesome suggestion. We've done a little bit of customer research in the past just to see if like funders had potential appetite for this type of feature. Just as one example, the person who wrote Freakonomics, Dr. Stephen Levitt, he works out of the University of Chicago and like has a nonprofit like trying to, I forget, it's like basically like technology, like a techno-utopian kind of like perspective where they want to fund projects that can help make the world a better place using technology. And so they actually were interested in running something through ResearchHub to get together a group of like 10 like premier scientists who were working on developing some kind of like carbon capture technology, and then trying to fund it like to the scale of like $1 to $10 million through ResearchHub. So I think there is like significant demand from funders to try and like experiment with new models for like helping to support scientific research. I think that like grants are definitely a great option. And once we get to the point where we kind of have like an MVP for this, putting together like some community members to help spread the word to potential like grant givers, I think would be extremely helpful. So yeah, in response, we've done a little bit of market research. There does seem to be some demand in doing like cool like one-off projects through ResearchHub, but I imagine that there would be more if we were to like put together a team of like salespeople per se to try and like reach out to these research funders.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And I also wanted to add something on top, just because like after your answer, I thought about something else. As for the peer review, I think something that could really distinguish like ResearchHub from let's say other journals. Like in journals, you normally have like a round of peer review where like 3 reviewers that give their opinion, and then when it's published, that's it. Something that we could have on ResearchHub could be like say a continuous of review, so like different rounds. So like the paper after like let's say a year gets a little bit, let's say, old or not updated, and people can just update it with new data and make it like a living paper. That could be really cool to add, like, give another additional value to what is done on ResearchHub.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, and that's actually I have one of the questions here. Should we support periodical peer reviews as opposed to a single point in time? I think that's what you're referring to, right? Is that like basically,
yeah,
right? Okay. Yeah, it seems like logical to me. I think maybe every so often we should like make a paper eligible for peer review, because like we want to kind of move away. There's a lot of like old science that was peer reviewed and maybe made sense back then, and the outcome of that science are still like embodied in doctors' practices and stuff like that. And yeah, it makes total sense to be eligible for peer review. So what do we want to talk about next? More peer review stuff, or do we want to go into like the trending score?
Either works. We do need to leave a few moments for the code of conduct discussion.
I think we could do like 5 minutes on that at the end. It's pretty simple. I just have like a few examples. And I also think realistically, we might need to do like a whole community call dedicated to peer review. It seems like a pretty big topic, and making sure we get it right would be useful. Maybe over the next week, we can try and have people like add their thoughts into this discussion on GitHub, and then we'll have some content in order to like host a discussion next week where we can really dig into peer review for like half an hour or 45 minutes.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. If you can take a look, add your thoughts. And just one more thing about GitHub. It would be really helpful if you all created like a GitHub account, if you don't have one already. If you go to our repo and click this star button, this is actually, it seems trivial, but it actually really helps us because it makes GitHub give more visibility into our project, which helps attract more eyes and developers. So if you don't mind doing so, they'll be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, kind of adding to that too. Like we have a core team at ResearchHub, which is like kind of like 4.5-ish developers. But we're really lucky in that like some open source engineers have also started to contribute code to our database. And so like a lot of the small bugs that have been popping up, the more open source developers that we have in our community where we can just throw bounties out, the faster we'll be able to actually like fix these things as they come up. So yeah, like clicking on the GitHub star, it seems silly, but it actually does a lot when it comes to marketing for open source developers. And at the end of the day, it'll allow us to like fix bugs faster. So definitely worth the time.
Cool. Do we want to talk about this trending score now or code of conduct? What do we want to do next?
Let's do the trending score. It would be interesting. So a little bit of context here. We had like a V1 of the trending score, which we haven't touched in a while. And in theory, we'd like to improve it because we think that the homepage doesn't accurately like reflect basically what's going on in the community. So we have sort of an initial idea of how we would like to implement like a V2 of this trending score. But it'd be interesting to hear like what the community wants us to prioritize in this score, whether like just as a couple examples, like we automatically will crawl Twitter to see if like people are talking about an article on Twitter, and we have that, weighted at a certain percentage. We have like discussion posts, like are people like discussing on ResearchHub about this paper, and then that goes into the algorithm weighted at a certain percentage. We have like native upvotes on ResearchHub. So if you upvote it on ResearchHub, how does that compare to like a retweet on Twitter within the algorithm? So we can do almost anything here. We could even do like page views or like PDF downloads. So like lots of different factors could go into this. So curious, yeah, what everybody thinks here should contribute to what ends up on the homepage.
As for the Twitter score, how is that calculated? Like, who publishes? Like, you just use the main account, the main ResearchHub account that pulls some papers from the hubs and put it on Twitter. How does it work? Because I don't have a Twitter account for ResearchHub. I want to make one, but I don't have it still.
Yeah. So the way it works is, and it kind of ties back into some of the bug reports that we had, which are not actually a bug. They're they're a feature, which is it made sense back then, but maybe not so now. So what happens is when you upload a paper, we take the DOI of the paper, we crawl Twitter, we find like mentions and upvotes and things like that in Twitter that reference the DOI or the paper. I'm not exactly sure. and then we get like a number, like the number of mentions. I think we add up the number of mentions, and we put that number into our own native upvote score, which is not ideal. So basically, sometimes you'll see like a really highly voted paper, 96 or 100, and you're thinking to yourself, like, how did it get so many upvotes? It's because some of these upvotes actually come from this Twitter score. So what we're thinking about is actually decoupling that score into like a social media score, separate from the upvote. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that will totally make sense. Like, especially when when we want to build our social media presence, that will totally make sense. Yeah, to decouple it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing that's very interesting to me as I'm thinking about it is that, like, content on Reddit, if you go to Reddit or if you go to Hacker News, a lot of the content that you see in the homepage is directly related to the time it was uploaded. So there is like some log function that takes into account a bunch of things, and the time is the number one factor for like what shows up in the homepage. And ResearchHub could be similar, but could be different. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So it could be similar in a sense that if a paper is uploaded, we take into a factor like the publish date and the upload date. So maybe two factors of time attributes. We calculate them into the score. So we could do that. However, the other side of this that I'm curious to hear your thoughts about is, like, one of the things we want to avoid happening on ResearchHub is basically duplicates of papers being uploaded, because we want to maintain all discussions into in like one paper thread. So like, let's say I upload a paper with a specific DOI and Patrick comes and uploads the same paper with a DOI, he's going to get an error saying like this paper already exists. And with that being said, that kind of poses like an interesting dilemma about what should show up in the homepage. So imagine an old paper that was uploaded a while back but has maybe now recent comments. Should that show up in the homepage? Should that be taken into account? I'm not sure if anyone has any thoughts about that and whether that makes sense.
How smart is your algorithm? Like how close to YouTube is it, right? So maybe it could go to the top if someone posted a recent comment, but if nobody clicks on it anyway, then maybe it stays there for like a day or something and goes back to to the bottom.
Yeah, it's not very smart in that sense, but it could be. So what you said, Anton, makes sense. Like maybe we put some stuff up there and we take into account clicks as a factor. If no one clicks on it in a particular period of time, we lower the score by a certain percentage.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Like for it to be trending, there has to be, it can't just be based on like how new it is. It also has to be like based on engagement.
Right, exactly. So
But
engagement is very important, yeah.
Yeah, what's hard probably is probably why you did the Twitter thing, right? Because our network is not like large yet, so it's hard to like get natural organic engagement because like we're not like Reddit yet. So I guess your big question is like, how do you replace that while we build our network, eh?
So for the Twitter score, our initial idea was to use Altmetric, which is this Elsevier-owned company that basically like will crawl all social media for you and then gives like a score around that, basically like a popularity score. It costs $30,000 a year to subscribe to this, so we figured like we'd be better off kind of like making a bespoke like short-term solution until we could potentially afford that or hire engineers to make our own version. So yeah, we wanted to do Altmetric, but this is like kind of like an 80-20 solution to get a little bit of the way there at a much less cost.
Yeah, so we just have a few more minutes. before I know Patrick want to talk about the code of conduct. Any other thoughts about? I really like the fact that we take into account clicks. That's a very good idea. Are there any engagement metrics that we can use, or maybe other things that you have in mind?
Kobe, is there a possibility of like the user affects like let's say like an editor engages in a lot of posts, like he has more say in his click or upvote than others? Is that a thing the system can do?
So one thing we've wanted to do is to actually input each user's like scientific expertise. So like if you like had ever published a paper and you claim that paper, we could in theory say, hey, Joey, has published in pharmacology before, and now his upvote will be worth more than Joyce's, who has never published in pharmacology. But Joyce has like a publication in molecular biology, so maybe Joyce's upvote is worth more in molecular biology than Joey's. That's it's not a trivial thing to do. It's kind of complicated to like actually build that algorithm and like accurately keep track of everyone's scientific expertise. So we could do something kind of minimal like you're suggesting, but I think at the end of the day, we want to like be able to have the upvotes be influenced by people's like real life knowledge. So that way, instead of like one problem that Reddit has, I think, is Reddit Science, the most upvoted papers are kind of like, they appeal to the most people. Like they're either about how like weed can help cure depression, or like llama antibodies, are good at treating COVID. Like they're kind of like jokey stuff that like is relatable to everyone. And we think we'd get a like more scientific feed if basically experts are able to influence their feed within their own hubs.
Nick, you had a comment? Can you do a quick one before we move on?
I was kind of curious. So as far as the trending is, if a paper is upvoted, is that the same value in the trend algorithm as an upvote on a comment of that paper? Because when we're talking about clicks, is there a weighting system where if someone's reading the comments and then upvoting the comments too, that could skew it? Because it's easier to just upvote from the homepage, but if you're actually going into the comments, I was just wondering if there was a weighting.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I'm pretty sure we don't take into account any upvotes on a comment, and we should. So that's something that we're going to fix. And I agree that should be another kind of like a signal of engagement.
Okay, cool.
It's a great suggestion too, because we really want to emphasize discussions. We think kind of our hypothesis is that's the best way to increase weekly active contributors. So having the most discussed papers show up first in the feed is a great suggestion.
Oh, and one more thing too. Do you guys take into account the RSC given to a poster? Probably not, not yet.
So we used to. That was like kind of the first business model that we had tried out, where if you supported a paper, it would also influence the position in the feed. So in theory, like if you really liked somebody else's paper, you wanted more people to see it and comment on it, you could spend RSC in order to increase its position in the feed. We tried this, and it turned out that like a lot of the papers on the homepage were just not very good, and were just like whatever the people who had earned the most RSC wanted. So maybe this is a solution in the future when RSC is better distributed and more people can kind of like, compete with their RSC support. But in general, we don't love the idea of kind of like this advertising via tokens. We think there's a lot of downstream, negative consequences. Like the positive outcomes are a lot less likely than the potential negative outcomes, and the revenue we generate aren't totally worth it. So next thing we'd like to do is talk about kind of the code of conduct that we'd like to implement. Anton shared a Notion page of our mission, vision, and values, which is kind of like the top level organization of how ResearchHub is put together as a company. What I'd like to go into is our paper submission guidelines and then our discussion guidelines. And so this is kind of like a living document, but the idea here is sort of what Kobe mentioned earlier, is how do we distinguish ourselves from other sites that are kind of like ResearchHub, where if you go on like Reddit Science or like Reddit Neuroscience, how do we make sure that ResearchHub ends up being like the forum with an academic tone, with like a heavily scientific tone? So I'll share my screen here, and kind of what I plan on doing is just going over the submission guidelines and then examples of like good submissions versus, like not ideal submissions. And then same thing with discussion. So if anybody has any thoughts, yeah, please just let me know. So first, for the submission guidelines, we want research that follows the scientific method. So this is avoiding subjective content, no anecdotes, so like case studies, opinions, so non-systematic reviews, press releases, which are more about like trying to garner attention for a company, or policy papers. And this is like how research would end up influencing like government or like a company's kind of actions. No bias through sensational headlines. So the editorial titles should, in theory, represent the content within the paper, not necessarily overstate it. This is a big issue on Reddit, and I'll do a workshop on this later, but I'm pretty good at wording sensational headlines that get a lot of upvotes on Reddit. And so like I intentionally do this to get upvotes, and it ends up, I think, making Reddit science not as good and kind of like a marketer's haven. So we want titles to be representative of the content within a paper. Use peer-reviewed or in-progress work. This is just share papers, not blogs. So preprints or papers. No legal content. This is to protect our own butts. So only upload like the PDFs of papers that have open access licenses. I think everybody's doing a pretty good job with this so far. So I don't think there are any issues. We link to paywalls automatically, so this isn't a problem. No off-topic content. Focus on accelerating the pace of scientific research. Don't engage in social or political activism. This one's a favorite of Brian from Coinbase. I don't think that this is happening at all currently, though. So I think the behavior on ResearchHub has been perfectly fine when it comes to this. So just an example of like a good paper versus like a not ideal paper. So this is the one I was talking about earlier when it comes to CBD for osteoarthritic dogs. If you look at this paper on the inside, it has like a background, it has methods, it has results, and it has clinical significance. So essentially a study where if you were to look at the methodology, would you be able to independently reproduce this? And are the results presented in a way that it's like reporting research results without necessarily trying to add an opinion to the statement? I know a lot of conclusions, they kind of require you to add an opinion, but the idea here is like papers that follow the standard, like I guess layout of objectives or like abstract, background, methods, results, discussion, and then conclusion if it has this. So looking at a post that might not qualify, in cryptocurrency, we've had a couple posts that are like links to outside blogs where it's essentially like an opinion on the blog, and the ResearchHub post is being used as a place to kind of jumpstart a conversation. And so like, I think everybody here sees the difference between like a standard scientific article and like a link to a blog. So in theory, we would want editors to help remove content like this in order to like focus the hub on more scientific papers. I know there are like cryptocurrency journals, like there's one called Ledger. There's actually one in Frontiers in too. So we would prefer to have people be posting like actual scientific papers or systematic review papers, meta-analyses, that kind of thing. Does anybody have any questions about the paper submission guidelines before we move on to discussion guidelines?
Yeah, we have a hand from Ricardo and Olga.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. Just for the upload paper, like that are not under licenses. Do you have any like specific trick to like kind of like detect which ones are under? Because like I know most of the journals that are open access and not, but like I try to do it like with incognito or like guest mode and so on. But it's still like kind of like keep me logged in my on university. So we can like if anyone has a trick, just put it in the Slack so that I can see it, because some journals sometimes have some issues that are open access, even if the journal itself is not open access.
Yeah, so this is actually really hard. And I think that we need to build a feature set around this eventually to automatically detect what the license is and maybe even display it on ResearchHub. Well, what I do, and this is not a great solution, but I normally like actually look at the article. So I'll like pull open the PDF, and normally like on the PDF, there will be like a license information. So normally it's on the front page, but sometimes it's on like at the very end near like article information. Again, this is not a great solution, but on the paper somewhere, there's normally an indication of like what the license that it was published under is. And then if it's Creative Commons, it's perfect. If it's says like all rights reserved, then it's not perfect. Yeah, I'm failing miserably here because this doesn't have an example, but I'm pretty sure that all Frontiers in is published under Creative Commons, and you can essentially find it on the paper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. And then we should definitely build like some tooling around this too, because it's a lot to expect people to dig into the actual papers themselves.
Hey guys.
Udo, you were next.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Molek.
Yeah, just quickly on that, like, so the Creative Commons, you know, and I think I had talked with Anton earlier about this, so there is CC BY, which is like, I think the full non-restricted access, but then there is also CC BY NC ND, which is non-commercial and non-something. And I think since as editors, we get paid, I don't know if the non-commercial like prevents us from putting it. So I had a couple articles where I just put the link to it and didn't upload it on the website. So I think we need to clarify that too eventually, that can we do both, or is it just the exact CC BY?
Yeah, so you can do non-commercial and non-derivative. The non-derivative means that you can't add to it on your own. So like you couldn't upload it into our ELN and then like change part of it. Non-commercial refers to like marketing, or like if we wanted to like actually make a product out of the information shared within it. So I think it's like questionable if we were to tweet it from the ResearchHub account as like a way to actually bring people in. But if editors want to share it, it's totally fine for people to repost that type of content around the internet.
Great, thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
Olga, go ahead.
Yeah, I have several comments I have. So first of all, I think what we see here falls short of code of conduct. For example, here is a code of conduct of Google, and that's how it, in my imagination, should look like. And I think things like harassment, discrimination, and other things also always included in code of conduct, and we also should include them in there. Also, can you go back to the previous one? Yeah, so the 3 things that are listed here constitute a scientific method. So that kind of feels a little bit confusing. I think if we want to follow some kind of idea about being objective without political activism, etc., we should be very strict about definitions of those things, right? So we should talk about what biased means, what political activism means, what engaging in political activism looks like, and what is mission and why does it contradict engagement in political activism. Because, for example, I have papers in my hub about evidence-based policies, right? And science-informed policies, things like this. So for social sciences, at least, those things very often go hand to hand, and it's very hard to disentangle them, even though it's a valid science and there is nothing you can do about it.
So the example that I like to think of here is, can it be reproduced? So for instance, like an example, if you looked at cannabis for depression, right? Like there could be a paper that like does a retrospective like analysis of people who have smoked cannabis and their rates of depression, and in theory, like they can include their methodology, so that way other people would be able to also do this retrospective analysis and see if they find like the same results. But then like there could also be a paper saying like, hey, the United States needs to reschedule cannabis from like a Schedule 1 drug because of these downstream effects. So in theory, we want the paper that's about how cannabis influences depression, but we don't want the paper that's about how laws should be changed with cannabis legalization. One thing you could do is look at, like, I know there's some papers that look at like when Colorado made cannabis like decriminalized, like their like drunk driving accidents went down. So that's something where it's like, hey, it's not a policy recommendation, but they have a distinct methodology that they use to look at the effect of a policy decision. And like somebody else could, in theory, replicate that analysis. And so that would be okay. So basically, if there's a method section where someone else would be able to reproduce that method section and then either replicate or not replicate the results, that's what we want to focus on initially. The idea here is that we want to stay as close as possible to discussing like the actual science behind papers and not talking about like kind of like the bigger picture effects that happen because of like some of this knowledge that's shared. Does that make sense? I think there is a future where we kind of like expand the scope of ResearchHub, but this is like kind of to help set a tone and culture of like actually discussing reproducible science and like the findings within a reproducible science paper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and that's why it's worrisome. Because so what do we do? What do we do with the review papers? They don't have a methodology section. What do we do with non-empirical sciences, theoretical physics, math?
Yeah, so our idea here is that we wouldn't want like narrative review papers. Systematic reviews are better and meta-analyses are better. Theoretical papers around like physics and math, we don't really have that much content being shared in those fields at the moment. So we would prefer to focus on like non-theoretical subjects just for this like kind of initial stages while we build up like our community and try and get to product market fit. I think that there's a lot that could be talked about here. So maybe we can think about it a little bit more and like have more discussion next week, just in the interest of time, because we got to move on to the discussion sections. So this is a little bit closer to what you were thinking, Olga, where it says, hey, don't be mean, like, you know, respect everybody. We had a contributors covenant also here somewhere, so I will add that back. But the idea with discussion guidelines is we want to focus on discussing papers. So essentially, the discussion should be about what's presented in the paper and a little bit less about like tangential things that relate to it. So for example, here's a really good example. Sorry, clicked on the wrong one. That Nick shared. He posted a paper that's, you know, pretty scientific, falls into the reproducible science format that we just talked about, and then included like a great description of what's happening in the paper. And then there was discussion around like the actual details of the content in the paper. So this is ideally what we're looking for, like discussion around the content of the paper itself. Yeah, does anybody have any questions here?
So it seems like the ideal paper would be typical STEM paper that doesn't have a need for ecological validity.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. Typical STEM papers that
doesn't have a need for ecological validity. So we don't discuss, there is no need to discuss real world implications like in social science.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair like interpretation of what we want to go for initially.
So social science hubs, just not great, and we shouldn't have them.
Well, I think there's actually like really good use of like discussing the methodology used within a social science paper to say like, hey, do the results actually like support the conclusions that the authors claim at the end? I think there's a lot that can be done when it comes to like actually talking about the
yes, yeah, I agree with that, and I would say ecological validity and real world applications are one of them. Two of them.
I think there's a world where we get there eventually, but this is what we want to start off with initially in order to help distinguish ourselves from like Reddit science, where if you look at the comments on Reddit science, a lot of it is mostly like kind of the real world implications of the paper being discussed, not really the paper itself. And so we think that this is a good way to help basically make us be the leading scientific forum for discussing papers.
And we will talk more about the examples next time too, right? So there could be definitely scenarios where the papers are like they have strict methodology and they replicate very well. So for example, like even in our department, one of the professors studies the perception of pain, right? So perception of pain can be different across races. So what comes from that is that if you're interviewing a patient from a different race, you could underestimate their pain level and you can prescribe systematically less painkillers or something like that. So that obviously, that's really close to political, right? So, and the topic itself can be like high octane. So like I also understand the desire to like stay away from this topic just in case. I think ideally we will develop like the good balance, right?
Yeah, for sure. And this is something where we're going to grow over time. So we think it's better for the health of ResearchHub to grow in a more like discussing papers kind of fashion. And this could, change in the future, but this is also an assumption on our part. And if it doesn't work, like we're open to expanding this. This is just kind of to distinguish ourselves from the other forums that exist for this type of content. Cool. So we're about 15 minutes over now. Does anybody have any like final thoughts or comments until next week?
Just a couple questions for Kobe. Is Kobe still online? No,
I think
he just left. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if the bug was fixed, like the one on paper uploads, because like the paper. Oh, okay. Here it is. Kobe. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Is the paper upload bug fixed? Like the one the paper were basically disappearing. Like I published a couple papers and they disappeared from the
feed. The feed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is the issue of like when you upload the paper, it takes about like an hour for it to show up in the feed. Are you saying, Ricardo, that it's still not the case? It just doesn't show up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just able to retrieve it when searching for it through a comment. A comment I made. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you send me? I'm not sure. Sorry if you did already, but can you share with me the paper
Sure.
and the hub, and I'll look into it. I'm working on that anyway, so I'll try to fix it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nick, before we jump off.
Yeah, just a quick word. I've been trying to track, because it's sort of difficult to see how upvotes relate to the amount of RSC we have, and which papers we got it from. I noticed some delays in getting RSC from upvotes from some papers, and it's hard to track when they come in. So I was wondering if perhaps I could put it on GitHub and we could open source it, but if that could be checked or tested.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've been talking about internally is just creating like an audit trail of like how exactly you earned RSC to give you more visibility into how RSC is generated, because there is a bit of a delay right now. You might have experienced an additional delay recently because one of our things was down the past 24 hours, which caused additional delay. But to mitigate these concerns, we're looking into it, and it might be a good open source candidate. I do agree.
Cool. One more thing. So I just tried to send some RSC to my wallet. I'm still seeing the 5,000 prompt, so I could see the 100 fee, but I still get the 5,000 prompt.
Okay, so you're saying that the fee has changed, but the 5,000 minimum withdrawal has not yet?
That's right.
Okay, cool.
I think the limit once per 10 day also is still there.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, thanks for giving that feedback. I'll ping Pat Lou and hopefully get that fixed later today. So that way, I think we plan on having a DAO vote later in the week. We'll make sure that everybody has plenty of time in order to withdraw and then participate in that DAO vote. Cool. Yeah, well, thanks again for everybody's time and for staying for so long. This has been super productive. Yeah, if you have any thoughts on the hot score or the peer review feature, feel free to post them in the GitHub discussion, and we'll use kind of that discussion to lead our conversation next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
See you all later. See you in Slack.
Bye.
Everyone.